PKC 2022. Let me introduce first invited speaker, Dr. Dustin Moody. Dr. Dustin Moody is a mathematician in the NIST computer science, the computer security division. He received his PhD from the University of Washington in 2009. His area of research deals with elliptic curves and all the applications in cryptography. Dr. Moody leads the post-quantum cryptography project at NIST, and today he'll talk about the latest status of NIST PQC standardization. Let's welcome Dr. Dustin Moody.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hopefully you can see and hear the slides. Let me know if not. Yeah, thankful to be able to speak on behalf of NIST and our post-quantum cryptography team. It would be nice if we could all be there together for PKC in Japan. It was 6 years ago in Japan when I went to give a talk that kicked off the NIST post-quantum cryptography standardization process. And it's been a long 6 years, and I did not know what was in store for me when we started this off. So I titled this talk, The Beginning of the End. Sounds a little bit ominous, I've been told. I call it that because we're nearing the end of the third round of our process. And at the end of the third round, we will, of course, name some algorithms that we will be standardizing. So the competition is getting close to reaching some kind of a stopping point. Of course, it's not completely the end. I'll talk about more work that will continue to go on. So the outline for my talk, I will talk about what is our PQC standardization process, what's happened during the last 6 years, when will NIST announce the results. I'm sure some of you were hoping that today would be the day, and I was hoping so as well when I was invited to give this talk at PKC. It was a goal to try and get our announcement ready. That hasn't quite happened yet. It'll probably be a couple more weeks. And so we hope by the end of the month to be able to announce the algorithms that we will select. So I'll talk a little bit about that and what the future holds as well. So as motivation, I'm sure many of you are probably aware of this, but back in the 90s, there was some very influential and foundational research that was being done that helped spur research into a new field. Of course, this refers to Peter Shor's algorithm in 1994 that gave a exponential speed up when using a quantum computer to solve some problems that we care about for cryptography, particularly for public key cryptography. Shor's algorithm, if you have a large enough computer to implement it efficiently, could solve two different problems. First, it would be able to factor large integers, and second, it could solve the discrete log problem. Of course, we know both of those are the basis for various public key crypto systems that we use in practice. Another algorithm which is important is Grover's algorithm. It was not an exponential speedup, but it was also a quantum algorithm that gave a polynomial speedup in unstructured search. So both of these algorithms, they impact some of the cryptography that we have at NIST. In particular, NIST has various public key cryptography standards. We've standardized a key establishment that includes encryption as well as key exchange, like the Diffie-Hellman. And we also have various digital signatures standardized. And with Shor's algorithm, every single one of those algorithms in our standards would be vulnerable to attacks from a large-scale quantum computer. So we would need to completely replace those crypto systems. It would not be enough to simply increase parameters, because you'd have to increase them so much, it would be just so inefficient to use them. Some of our symmetric key primitives would also be impacted by Grover's algorithm or other quantum algorithms, but the impact is less dramatic. We would need to use longer key sizes, use longer outputs from hash functions, which is doable. We don't have to completely replace the algorithm. So the focus of our project was geared towards the public key side first. we needed to standardize new algorithms to replace the ones that would be broken. And this field has come to be known as post-quantum cryptography, or sometimes quantum safe or quantum resistant cryptography. And the big question is, well, when do we need to worry about this? Obviously, we have to worry about it before quantum computers arrive. If we wait till after they arrive, it'll be too late. That's the trivial answer. The other answer that we always give is, well, we need these new crypto systems long before then. In every presentation, I referred to Dr. Mosca's theorem here that helps you understand that you could be at risk from a threat of a quantum computer long before a quantum computer is ever built. And the way to imagine that is to just think about the case where your adversary is able to get a hold of your data and he copies it and encrypts it, or he copies your encrypted data, so the adversary cannot read it yet, but he simply holds on to it. And then after a quantum computer comes out, they will get access to your data. So the only way to prevent that is if before a quantum computer comes around, we need time to discover new quantum resistant algorithms, to standardize them, get them implemented in products, and get them widely adopted. So you need all that to happen first, so you can use quantum resistant algorithms. And then if you're wanting to keep your information safe for a number of years, in this case, it's X in this little theorem, you need the number of years to keep your information safe, plus the number of years for standardization and getting things adopted to be less than the time it takes to get a quantum computer. If not, then you have a problem. So from our experience at NIST with standardization, we've seen some past crypto transitions, and we know that they are never as quick as we would like them to be. There are steps you can take to try and speed them up a little bit, but getting organizations to switch from one crypto algorithm to another, it just takes time, and it takes time to standardize and evaluate new algorithms. So that's why it's very important to begin this work and get it accomplished well before we have a quantum computer out there. What is the status of quantum computers? I'm not going to speak much about it. You can see that there are headlines that give you all sorts of information, different organizations that are building quantum computers, trying to make them larger, have less errors in them, and we try and track their progress. I also like to turn to some other experts who have quantified the probability that we would have such a computer. So at the Global Risk Institute, Dr. Mosca and Dr. Piani and some of their colleagues have put out a survey every year where they've asked several experts what their opinion is about when would we have a quantum computer that would be large enough to break RSA 2048 in 24 hours. This is their latest results that they have. These were posted just a month or two ago. And this gives you some kind of estimates. Maybe there's some knowledgeable estimates by some people who seem to know a little bit. Of course, nobody knows for certain. What we can take from this is a chart that kind of summarizes their main findings. But if you look at that bottom row, so what are the odds in 5 years? The experts surveyed put it at pretty low odds. Most of them were below 1%, 5%. If you look at the next few rows up, if you go to 10 years and then 15 years, you start to see more of these people who were surveyed think that there's a higher chance that we could have a big enough quantum computer to threaten cryptography. So maybe all you can take from this is that, you know, it's certainly a possibility to have a big enough quantum computer in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. We don't really know, but there's a chance that could happen. And we need to be prepared with new crypto algorithms before that happens. So at NIST, we've had our project going for a number of years. It started before 2016, which is the first date on this slide. But that was the date we kind of began some bigger actions that were more visible. It was in 2016 that we went to PQ Crypto and announced the the PQC competition-like process where we would be soliciting crypto systems from design teams around the world to find these new algorithms. Since then, it's been 6 years and we've gone through 3 rounds of evaluation. We've held workshops throughout that process. We've issued reports to explain the choices we've made at NIST. And where we are currently is the 3rd round is about to end, and then we will very shortly begin writing the draft standards that we will put out for comment and publish. So I'll talk a little bit more in detail about some of these events during these past 6 years. Back in the beginning, this was a slide that was on my first presentation in Fukuoka about the PQC process that we would be doing. We were calling for quantum-resistant crypto algorithms for new public key crypto standards. We wanted 2 different functionalities because we needed to focus first on the basic primitives before trying to do anything more advanced. And we wanted to replace the algorithms that we had in our NIST standards. So that was, again, digital signatures and also encryption or key establishment. We saw our role at NIST as managing a process of achieving community consensus in a transparent and in a timely manner. NIST has done a few of these crypto competitions over the past few decades, and we think they have worked out pretty well in harnessing the tremendous talent that the cryptographic community around the world has and focusing it on a certain problem. We knew in many ways that this would be different than the past competitions. We also anticipated that it would be a lot more complicated than the AES and the SHA-3 competitions. We're dealing with more primitives. Post-quantum crypto is a very active field of research, so we knew that there would be results that would be ongoing throughout the process. We knew we would be picking more than one algorithm at the end of this, not just a single one. Some of these algorithms come from a variety of different mathematical families and backgrounds. We also have to worry about classical computers and quantum computers. So we knew that this was going to be a very complicated and tricky thing to do. Our hope was that at the end, we would be able to select some algorithms that most people would agree were good choices and would work for the majority of applications. Our evaluation criteria. First, we wanted to ensure that the algorithm selected would be secure, both against classical attacks and against quantum attacks. For some of the algorithms that were submitted, some of the best known attacks are classical attacks. For others, the best known attacks are quantum attacks. So we need to provide protection against both. The second criteria involved performance, which is a pretty big criteria because you can measure that in a variety of different ways. You can look at benchmarks in software and hardware on low-end platforms. You can look at what are your key and ciphertext sizes, what are your signature sizes. And so all those different ways that you can measure performance, we wanted to look at and make sure that applications and protocols would be able to use any algorithms that were selected. Besides those 2 main criteria, there were a number of other properties that we were hoping to get. As much as possible, we want these algorithms to be able to be dropped in to existing protocols and networks without requiring a lot of changes. We know that that might not be possible. Most of these algorithms have larger key sizes, but we think that it should work pretty well. We also wanted things like perfect forward secrecy, resistance to side channel attacks. That's an area that's getting a lot more focus, and so on and so forth. In looking at security, we needed to define some security levels or security categories so that we could compare the different crypto systems to each other. We knew we would get some based on lattices, some based on codes, some based on other ideas. And as kind of a first way to be able to compare them, we needed to try and measure in a rough way how much security they were providing when they gave us a concrete parameter set. There's no consensus as to the best way to do this back when we were defining these. I still don't think there's probably consensus even today as the best way to measure security in regards to both classical and quantum attacks. We define these categories in a way that leaves open the relative cost of the various computational resources, including things like quantum gates, classical gates, quantum memory, classical memory, hardware, energy, time, etc. The idea was that in order to meet, for example, say category 1, the best attack that would be violating the security definition for a particular parameter set should cost more than a brute force key search attack on a single instance of AES 128, according to any plausible assumption regarding the relative cost of the various computational resources involved in a real world attack. Of course, there are different opinions that can arise. This is subjective in many ways regarding what constitutes a plausible assumption regarding the relative cost of computational resources. And nonetheless, this was the best definition our team could come together with, and so that's what we used. And it's been a little bit easier. I think submitters tended to focus on levels 1, 3, and 5 because those were easier to provide arguments for. And if you wanted to argue a little bit more about providing more security against quantum attacks, you could look at levels 2 and 4 in relation to SHA-256 and 384. So the competition essentially began in December of 2017. We'd given submitters about a year to design their crypto systems. And overall, we received 82 submissions. 69 met our criteria for acceptance. We had almost 300 submitters that were part of the design teams for these algorithms. They were from all around the world. That was pretty cool to see that. And the first round lasted about a year. We held a workshop. All of the teams came and presented at the workshop and explained how their algorithms worked and their advantages that they saw. Even in the first round, we saw a lot of cryptanalysis right away from research that was done. There was probably around 25 schemes that were attacked or broken in some way. We set up the PQC forum, which is an online mailing list where you could discuss research, you could ask questions, we use it for announcements, and just basically all sorts of topics and discussion related to PQC standardization. And at the end of 1 year, we selected the 26 algorithms we thought were most promising to advance into the second round. There were some hard decisions to be made here. There were some good schemes that didn't make it because we needed to focus the number down to smaller. In large part, our goal was to just keep the algorithmic diversity of the different types of crypto systems that were submitted going into the second round. So in the first round, we'd seen a lot of lattice-based and code-based submissions. And so in the second round, again, the majority of the algorithms were both lattice-based and or code-based. Of course, there were also some multivariate signatures. We had 2 signatures based on symmetric primitives. And then we had a scheme based on isogenies of elliptic curves. During that second round, it ended up lasting about a year and a half. Similar again, we had a workshop where the teams could come and present any updates, and we saw new research that was done. There was more cryptanalysis done. Even though some of these schemes we picked to be the more promising ones, there were several of them that were attacked or broken during the second round as well. We started to see more benchmarking as well, more performance numbers. We started to see some mergers. There were some schemes that were very similar to each other, and we encouraged those teams to merge. I think, in fact, 2 of the schemes that are still in round 3 are mergers that happened earlier on. So at the conclusion of the second round, we focused on a smaller number again. We did something different than we've done in the past, where we made kind of 2 different categories of algorithms that would be moving on. The first category were finalists. These were the algorithms we thought would be ready to be standardized at the end of the third round, and that they would be general purpose type algorithms that could be used for the majority of applications. We also selected some other algorithms that we called alternates that we were still interested in. We still wanted study to continue on them, but we thought that they might take a little bit longer in order for standardization, or there was a little bit less urgency. So they could continue being studied and evaluated, but that they might need a 4th round of evaluation. So we put it this way so that we could have attention focused on the finalists and get a lot of dedicated research into them before they would potentially be standardized. So we had 4 Chem finalists, Kyber, NTRU, Saber, Classic, McLeese, and then we had 3 signature finalists, Dilithium, Falcon, and Rainbow. And then we had 5 Chem alternates and 3 signature alternates. And again, the table shows that we maintain the algorithmic diversity going into the 3rd round as well. We still had lattices, codes, multivariate, and so on and so forth represented. So I'll talk a little bit more about these schemes that are in the 3rd round. Not going to get into great detail or technical details about them. The 3 finalists, Kyber, NTRU, and Saber, are all based on what are called structured lattices. 2 of them are a little bit more similar. Kyber and Saber are both based on module learning with errors for Kyber, and for Saber, learning with rounding. NTRU was based on a different problem that's it's been around a little bit longer since NTRU was proposed in the 90s, what's called the NTRU problem. All 3 of these algorithms have pretty good performance. I'll show later on that they're pretty similar in performance as well. It's likely any of these 3 would be able to be used by most applications, and they do all right. Because they are quite similar, NIST expects to select at most 1 for standardization. There were 2 other lattice KEMS that were based on lattices that were alternates. We had NTRU prime. So NTRU prime also used structured lattices, and they had as a design consideration trying to prevent a number of potential attack surfaces. So that was part of the way that they looked at their design. And then PhotoChem, instead of all these other schemes using structured lattices, they made the choice to use unstructured lattices in case there's any potential attack that would exploit the structure. PhotoChem might possibly still be unaffected by that. So there's a security performance trade-off. Their key and ciphertext sizes are a little bit bigger, and their performance is a little bit slower than these other structured lattice schemes. The other finalist was based on codes, Classic McLeese. It's been around for over 40 years. It's seen a lot of cryptanalysis without a lot of significant concrete attacks that have shaved off any bits of security. It has an interesting performance profile, very large public keys. I think they might be the largest out of the KEMS that are in the 3rd round, but they have the very smallest ciphertexts. So for some applications, that might be a potentially useful thing if you can find a way to work around the large public keys. We had 2 other KEMS that were alternates that were based on codes as well. The design teams introduced some algebraic structure into the codes in order to try and reduce the key sizes down. And so they do both have much smaller key sizes than Classic McLeese in terms of the public keys. They're both pretty efficient. They're not quite as efficient as the structured lattice space finalists, but they're not too far behind either. And NIST is interested in them as good general purpose algorithms that would complement our KEM portfolio. So we want to continue research on them as well. The final alternate KEM, Psych, is based on isogenies of elliptic curves. That's a little bit newer idea. It's been probably only in the last decade that there's been more attention focused on the cryptographic applications of isogenies, where we're starting to see a lot of research being put into that. Psych has a performance profile that has very small public keys, very small ciphertexts, but as a disadvantage, it is slower in implementations by almost an order of magnitude in comparison to most of its competitors. So we still have a variety of different mathematical problems and security assumptions, which these KEMs are all based on. If we look at the signatures, there's a smaller number of them. We selected Dilithium and Falcon. Both were finalists. Both are based on structured lattices. Dilithium and Falcon, again, they're similar, but they have some differences. I'll go into them later on. Both have very good all-around performance. And so NIST is looking at them to see which would make good algorithms be selected for standardization. There was also 2 alternate signatures that were based on symmetric primitives. So Picnic is based on a zero-knowledge proof in a block cipher, LowMC. It has a very interesting design that was kind of different than anything else in the process. Its design has also evolved probably more than any other algorithm over the 3 rounds, as there's been a lot of research into kind of how Picnic could be improved and improve its efficiency in particular. Sphinx Plus, of course, is based on the security of hash functions. It's a stateless scheme. Security is very well understood. It's been we'd say it's a mature scheme and is been pretty stable throughout the process. It's a little bit bigger and not quite as efficient as the lattice-based schemes. Picnic is the same, has kind of similar performance characteristics. And then finally, we have the 2 multivariate-based schemes. The finalist Rainbow, which we thought was a little bit better than the alternate GEMS. They both have very large public keys, very small signature sizes. And in talking about Rainbow and GEMS, early on in the 3rd round, there was some cryptanalytic results that led to attacks on both Rainbow and GEMS. And the designers, responded to those. In Rainbow's case, they said, well, if you look at the amount of memory that's required, that might come into play. So it raised some doubts about having confidence in either of their security. Of course, very recently, in the past few weeks, we've seen Ward Boyens posted a new attack on Rainbow that breaks the category 1 parameters as titled in the paper in a weekend on a laptop. And that's got a lot of attention because I think people know we're close to the end of the 3rd round. And so seeing a finalist get broken catches their attention. Of course, during all 3 rounds, we have seen algorithms get attacked or broken. And that's because we have a lot of dedicated research going on. And that's what we expect to see throughout the process. Rainbow had shown some earlier signs of being potentially having some attacks, where earlier on in the 3rd round there had been some attacks. So this wasn't completely unexpected and out of the blue, but it was still a nice result to see this come out. And I think it serves as a reminder that until an algorithm has been completely evaluated and selected and standardized, you want to be careful not to put it into products until the standard is done. As a result of some of these attacks on these signatures, we only had 6 signatures in the 3rd round, and both GEMS and Rainbow had suffered attacks. About a year ago, we asked for feedback on 2 things that NIST might do to address some of these issues. The first thing we put forward is that we would consider, or we wanted feedback on the idea of standardizing Sphinx Plus after the 3rd round, even though it was an alternate and not a finalist. In our report, we'd mentioned it was a very conservative scheme and it had been stable and was ready for standardization. We also discussed the idea of introducing a new mechanism that NIST would start a process to consider new signature schemes after our current process was over. So we asked for feedback on both of those, and I would say we got positive feedback if NIST wanted to take actions on both of those different things. So the past few months, our team has been meeting very frequently, a couple of times a week, to evaluate which of the schemes we would select as we were nearing the end of the 3rd round. We had dedicated presentations on each and every candidate, looking at the evaluation criteria specifically, looking at the security, looking at the different parameter sets that they had, their security proofs, the best known classical and quantum attacks. We looked at all the performance numbers that we could find. It's easier to measure the size of the parameters, the key sizes, and so on. But we were also looking at efficiency of key gen, encryption, decryption, signing, verifying, both in software and hardware on many different platforms, how much memory they used, that kind of thing. And then we looked at particular algorithm and implementation characteristics. Were there IP issues? Did they have decryption failures? Has there been side channel work done on them? How good is the documentation that the team turned in? what papers were published in dealing with them, what was the discussion on the PQC forum about them. And so we've had a lot of good discussion internally, as well as on the PQC forum. We've seen there have been a lot of external discussion as well. We also had various presentations comparing some of these algorithms against each other so we could make some of these tough decisions that we'd have to make. For Lattice KEMS, our main decision that we were focusing on was selecting between Kyber, NTRU, and Saber. As I said, they're quite similar, and we expected to only need one of them to be our primary go-to algorithm that would work for most applications. Similarly, for lattice signatures, our main decision that we were focused on was looking at Dilithium and Falcon. For all of the other algorithms, when we were deciding, it kind of came down that each one was kind of its own competitor. And we were looking to see, would it advance or would it be selected for standardization based on its own merits. So there was a lot of kind of individual decisions there. Of course, they're somewhat in competition with each other in various ways, but the particular algorithm, the decisions were a little bit different than those two main decisions that I talked about up there. So giving a little bit more info on Kyber, NTRU, and Saber. Again, this isn't super detailed, but just a little bit more. As I said, Kyber and Saber are based on similar security assumptions. Both are based on module learning with errors. In Saber's case, learning with grounding, while NTRU is based on a different problem. All three were constructed from public key encryption schemes and then using some type of Fujisaka-Okamoto transform to convert it into a KEM. And then they were able to have security proofs dealing with indistinguishability against chosen ciphertext attacks. Kyber and Saber both had decryption failures. NTRU does not. There was different choices that these algorithms made in their design. So Kyber and Saber use modules with a cyclotomic ring that's a power of 2, whereas NTRU uses a cyclotomic ring with a prime power. There are other further differences, of course, when you dig into the specifications, but you can see that there's a lot of similarities as well as some differences. I put two charts up here just to give you some idea about the performance. Again, these are not intended to be, you know, we made our decision based only on these two charts kind of thing, but just to kind of show you how do they compare relative to each other. On the left, the chart shows the bandwidth, the public key size plus the ciphertext size, and it's grouped into category 1, category 3, and category 5. You can see at category 1, they're all pretty close together. Similarly for category 3. At category 5, NTRU's key sizes look to be a little bit higher, but they're still relatively comparable. On the right, I put a chart that looks at their performance in software on an AVX2 processor. And this takes into account their bandwidth as well as their efficiency in terms of cycle counts for keygen, encapsulation, and decapsulation, since performance in the real world would probably take both metrics into account. Again, you see all three, if you were to look at the numbers, they're very comparable and would probably do quite well compared to current crypto algorithms that we use today. Kyber and Saber tend to be a little bit more efficient based in this graph than NTRU, but again, all three would probably work just fine for most applications. If we look at a similar type of chart for Dilithium and Falcon, again, they're both lattice-based, but there are some different design differences. Dilithium is based more on module LWE, while Falcon was based on module SIS over NTRU type lattices. Dilithium uses the idea of Fiat-Shamir with the boards. It uses the simpler uniform sampling. Falcon's a little bit more complicated. It uses Hashton sign with a Gaussian sampling algorithm that's a little bit more delicate. In particular, their keygen and just overall implementation is more complex and potentially in some low resource environment. Falcon uses floating point arithmetic with high precision and some complicated data structures. And that might be a challenge in some cases. On the other hand, we'll see that Falcon has some performance advantages down below. They both use rings of the same type, again, cyclotomic extensions with powers of 2. They both had security proofs against existential unforgeability. And comparing them, you can see Falcon on the left, our chart that measures the public key plus the signature size. Falcon is noticeably smaller than Dilithium. It's got just a lot smaller key sizes and signature sizes. On the right, if we include the performance on, again, a software, an AVX2 machine, largely because of the bandwidth, Falcon again comes out ahead. So there are some trade-offs to each one. As we had to consider our decision, we had to carefully consider those. And then a factor which has played a part in a lot of our discussion, both internally and we've seen on the PQC forum as well, is the issue of patents and IPR. This played a larger role than I ever anticipated when we began the process. At the beginning, we had this IP statements that each team had to submit in, where their submission team let us know of any patents that they held or that they were aware of. Our call for proposal said we didn't object in principle to algorithms that had patents where technical reasons justify the approach, but NIST would strongly consider any factors which would hinder adoption in our evaluation process. We know that when there are IPR issues, people are less likely to adopt those algorithms. And one of our goals is to get these post-quantum algorithms widely adopted to help protect against future attacks from quantum computers. So this was obviously a big consideration. It's also a very complicated area. I'm not a lawyer. No one on my, our PQC team at NIST is a lawyer, and is something we've had to learn a little bit about. We've counseled with our NIST lawyers that we have who have helped us on this, but they are not crypto experts. So we've had to kind of work together. We are actively engaging to try and resolve known IPR issues. Of course, there was some we knew about initially because the submitters had patents on their own algorithms. We also became aware of third-party patents where outside parties and organizations held patents that were potentially relevant to some of the algorithms that we were considering standardizing. So we've been in talks with these parties to try and resolve them. Happy to say we've had some positive steps in the right direction, I'd say. I don't have any concrete details that I can give out at this point yet, but I'm happier than I was several months ago that we've been able to get things going in the right direction. It may not be possible for NIST to resolve all IP concerns because we can't control, what other parties do. So this was something during the third round that was definitely a large factor. And we're very much committed to getting an algorithm that will be able to be widely adopted. So, okay, so that is kind of what has gone on the past 6 years. Let me talk about the timeline and the future from here now. The third round will end literally any day now. We have made our decisions. We have written our report. It is undergoing the process that we have to go through at NIST to get it reviewed and approved by various people before we can publish it. My guess is it will still take a couple of weeks. I'm hopeful that by the end of the month, we will be able to announce which algorithms we will standardize. What will that announcement include? It'll include the finalist algorithms that we would like to standardize. It would also potentially include the alternate Sphinx Plus, even though it's not a finalist. We have said that it's an algorithm that we could potentially select for standardization at the end of the third round. And we'll, of course, have our report to go along with it. Our report, we've worked harder to make it a little bit more substantial than our last report, so that's taken more work. Our announcement will also include the candidates that are advancing to a fourth round for evaluation. That fourth round will be similar to our previous 3 rounds. It'll probably end up being a little bit longer because we'll be doing we'll be drafting the standards at the same time, and so our attention will need to be working on that as well. The algorithms in the fourth round will be to help us diversify our portfolio from the algorithms that we will select for standardization. It's likely we'll hold a workshop sometime in the fall or the winter of this year. We haven't completely got the details on that. And our goal is to release draft standards for public comment later on this year or early on in 2023. We want to get these quickly done. We'll put them out for public comment. We'd encourage everyone to take a look at them, give us comments, provide us suggestions. We'll then revise those and fix anything that needs to be fixed. And our goal is to have the final standard published by 2024. So what does standardization mean? Our current algorithms are standardized in a couple of different documents, in a FIPS, which stands for Federal Information Processing Standard, and some SPs, which stand for Special Publication. So we will write documents that completely specify how to implement and instantiate, the algorithms selected for standardization. In doing so, we will work with the candidate teams to help make sure we've understood it correctly and any details that need to be included in the standard, which might not have been in the specification. We'll need to select specific parameter sets to include and give a, describe what security strength they are providing. If we need to seek feedback from the community on any of these topics, we will of course do so, probably through the PQC forum. And then, as I said, we'll write those documents and we'll put them out for public comment, as we always do with our NIST documents. We'll make whatever revisions that we need to based on the feedback and then publish them for use so people can begin implementing them and putting them into their products. We'd again encourage everyone that we want to not put them into products until the standard is completely done. There could be small changes from the specification to the final standard. There won't be any major changes, but small things might need to be tweaked. I've mentioned that we'd also have a process for new signatures because we have just a smaller number of signatures in the third round. So NIST, we will also issue a new call for signatures shortly after we make our announcement. We wanted to get our announcement done before writing the call for signatures. But we will be asking for signatures like we did before. The deadline for submission will probably be sometime around January 2023. So that people have plenty of time to design these signature schemes. This process will be a lot smaller in scope than what we've done the past 6 years. We're not looking to recreate everything again. Our main goal is we want to diversify our signature portfolio. We're quite happy with having a good structured lattice-based digital signature. But what we want to do is have another general purpose digital signature that is not based on lattices. So we want to get another candidate or candidates that will fulfill that need. There could be other things that we're interested in. For example, a signature scheme with very short signatures would very likely be of interest to us. So we'd encourage, if you have questions about that, contact us and we can help if we're interested in your idea, or feel free to just submit it anyway. These signatures will be on a different track, a different progress than the candidates in the fourth round. The fourth round will be going as soon as the third round ends. This on-ramp, as we often call it, won't begin until probably almost a year after the third round ends. And these algorithms, they were just beginning the process. They will have to go through a number of years of evaluation before they could potentially be standardized. So obviously, the more mature the scheme that's submitted, the better, but we will still need to carefully analyze these algorithms. And so they'll be on kind of a parallel track from our current process. There are many important research challenges. There's been a lot of work in these areas during our 3 rounds of evaluation, and a lot during the third round in particular. But I would say these issues are also not settled yet. There's a lot of work that could be done. Internally at NIST, we're working on this, and we hope to encourage people to look at a variety of different topics as well. I don't think I'll go through and talk about any of these in detail, but they very much matter, and we want to still get the answers to some of these questions. NIST is one of many standards organizations. We're aware of other standards organizations, and we've been communicating and collaborating with them. It's been good to see we've been pretty united at focusing our attention mostly in the NIST process so that we could have all the cryptographers participating in it. But there are other organizations like IEEE P1363. They had some of the earliest lattice-based schemes standardized. The IETF has standardized some stateful hash-based signatures. NIST then later also standardized LMS and XMSS. They've also given some other, doing some other work in post-quantum cryptography. ETSI has released various quantum-safe crypto reports that have been very useful for organizations. There's expert groups that have made recommendations for particular algorithms. ISO has done a study period on quantum-resistant crypto. And we've also been in contact with other countries that have been working on standardization activities. And so we're grateful for this, and we hope this continues. In conclusion, I'd say the beginning of the end of our PQC process is here. You know, we're at the end of the third round where we are seeing some of the light at the end of the tunnel, and we will select some algorithms for standardization. It's not the complete end. As I've described, this work will continue. We have the fourth round of evaluation that will continue, and we'll have more digital signature schemes that we'll be looking at in the future. So we hope you continue to participate. We are grateful for everybody's efforts. We certainly could not do this without all the work that all of you have done, both in industry and academia, doing performance benchmarking, security analysis, real-world experiments. It's truly good to see that we're all working together on this. So of course, for more information, you can see our webpage, and I'd encourage you to sign up for the PQC forum if you haven't. That's where most of our announcements and the discussion relevant to this is going on. So again, thanks again for the invitation to talk, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as well.
Let's thank our speaker. Okay, so please raise your hand if you have any question. Is there any question from our audience?
Question. When you announce the winners, will there also be announcing which parameter sets, or will there be tweaking some parameter sets to be more conservative than what were in the submissions, or will that be any such change be pushed off till later in the review process? Yeah,
with our announcement, we are not picking the parameter sets yet, so that'll be part of the work after to select which parameter sets would be standardized. I think our intention is to not have a lot of tinkering. We want the evaluation that's gone on during the 3 rounds to matter. But if there needs to be new parameter sets, that's something that we might be open to. We'd probably discuss that with the community. But no, we won't be announcing specific parameter sets with the announcement.
So easy, okay. Okay, then please, Stephen.
Yeah, my question is really about quantum analysis. I feel like there's been a lot of effort by researchers from the crypto community in terms of classical cryptanalysis. I haven't got much of a sense that there's been a lot of input from people outside the existing crypto community, so people from quantum algorithms, and even the 5 security levels. I still don't know if I really understand what it means. What's a quantum attack on AES, for example? So do you feel like there's really been enough scrutiny from outside our community into the quantum hardness?
We would, of course, like to see more. It's a good point you've raised, that it's hard to bridge the gap between different communities of interest. We try to include more people that are experts in quantum algorithms. We have a few people on our team that are in that field, and from our perspective, there's been enough that we can select some algorithms for standardization. We would love to have more research and learn more, but yeah, that's going to be a challenge. It has been and will probably continue to be.
So is it okay? Then Professor Bernstein, please.
It's actually the other part of it, Tanja Lange.
Okay.
Dustin, you mentioned in the comparison of the Lattice finalist KEMS, the speed comparison and the size of the public key comparison, but you didn't comment on security comparisons. Could you say something about that?
Sure, yeah. So they're based on different problems, and in their specification documents, each of the teams presented arguments and made claims about the precise amounts of security that they were given. NIST is happy with the security discussion of all three teams, and all three could be selected for standardization. We're confident enough in their security that any of the three could be selected based on their security. I'm not sure if you're wanting more details or if there's a specific aspect of that.
Yeah, what I'm puzzled about is that you're saying now that the parameters are not going to be specified as part of the announcement, but you're saying, say, NTRU has larger public keys. Now they're also aiming for more bit security. And so if the exact security is not actually part of the evaluation or part of the decision now, then I don't quite see how the comparison of key sizes would matter, or the speed comparison. So what did you fix and what did you consider variable in that?
Well, we're not announcing them. We have thought about the specific parameter sets that would likely be standardized, but we also wanted to have discussions with the submission teams and what they felt, what they would recommend. Some of them included that discussion in their documents. But we did look at the existing parameter sets and the amount of security that each parameter set was providing, and that was factored into our decision. But on the other hand, yeah, we also were not quite ready to select the parameter sets because we wanted to talk with the submission teams and perhaps with the cryptographic community as well.
So is it okay?
I had a question.
Okay.
I had a question that I typed into Zulip. It's rather long. And it's a little bit theoretical, but because the breaks against RSA and discrete logs are still a little bit theoretical themselves, perhaps it's appropriate. A long time ago, I proposed a system which would be secure if either factoring or discrete logarithms was hard. And that paper was kind of rendered obsolete by Shor's algorithm, which attacks both. But I was wondering if you saw any proposals that tried to base their security upon two dissimilar algorithms, or if there was any work on universal composability in any of the proposals.
Yeah, so that's a good question. If I think about the schemes that were submitted, none are coming to mind that seem to be kind of designed with the idea of combining two different security assumptions. Maybe there is, and someone could correct me. I think some of the discussion in that direction has been that you could standardize a post-quantum scheme and combine it in some way, in some kind of hybrid fashion with another scheme, post-quantum or classical, as a way of, hedging your security and as a way of transitioning to these new algorithms. So that in order to break your hybrid mode or whatever, you'd have to break each of the different components. So we have seen some of that, but I'm not aware in individual schemes that was addressed too much. Some of the schemes did talk about a little bit. I can think of Psych in particular, since they use a lot of elliptic curve cryptography in their implementation, talked about how there would be a natural synergy to combine it with an existing elliptic curve algorithm, and you could reuse some of the elliptic curve algorithms, and the two would work well together that way. And then I forget, there was a second part of your question. I don't think I remembered what that was.
No, just whether there was any effort to address this question about, okay, so maybe we like lattices this week and we like, short vectors, we like factoring one week, elliptic curves another week, but we don't really have any evidence for any of these problems being secure. So I was just sort of wondering why we don't try to, if we're really seeking a long-term security for something, why we don't propose something that would compose multiple problems, which are apparently dissimilar.
Yeah, it's easier to analyze each individual component and then try and put them together, I would think. And if you're trying to build an algorithm, design an algorithm that would be competing against others for this process, you probably wanted to not make it, you wanted to have it be smaller key sizes, be more efficient, and combining more than one algorithm would potentially hurt that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there any other question?
Oh, there was a question about whether your slides would be available, and I saw there's a PowerPoint, but if you could convert it to PDF, I could put it on the web.
Sure, yeah, I can send that to you.
Okay, if no question, let's start our speaker again.
Thank you.
So as a token of our appreciation, we will be sending Dr. Dustin Moody commemorative plaque and other mementos. Okay, let me show the plaque. So this way we sent to all Dustin Moody, Dr. Dustin Moody, as well as the commemorative mementos. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's have a break, and we will start the next session from